Hi, I'm Sue McCleary, aka Passion Flower Sue, and I'm excited to be part of the 2023 Mayesh Design Star video series. This year, Mayesh has chosen to explore the topic of sustainable floristry and how we as florists can reduce our environmental impact and contribute to positive change. In the last video, I shared some of my favorite reusable and compostable mechanics and one way to approach large-scale design by using a welded frame and water receptacles to hold your fresh materials. Today, I want to focus on another way to design large-scale pieces. The approach behind today's design is doing more with less. Not necessarily less flowers, but getting comfortable working with just a few elements. This is a practice that allows you to become more flexible, to welcome working with flowers that are in season, and learning to pivot when your favorites aren't available. It's also a call to explore how elements can be stretched, reused, reworked in various ways. I'll show you a couple takes on this floating piece and tips on how to maximize materials throughout. Let's get started. So to make this floating arch, I've repurposed a tangle of smilax vine that I've actually had for about 3 years. It was fresh when I acquired it. We used it for a wedding. After the wedding, I gathered it and kind of tied it in a little bundle and allowed it to dry naturally. To make sure it's nice and strong, in a few key points, I just did a little twist of bind wire to keep the coils from uncoiling. From there, I hung the smilax structure to the ceiling just with regular twine from the hardware store. When I'm hanging something that's heavier, I like to use Oasis Rustic wire. Both of these materials are reusable as opposed to zip ties. They're just two simple go-to hanging mechanics that I use again and again. As for the fresh components for this piece, I've chosen to work with 5 botanicals. First, this Hyperium berry that I pre-strung. You can do this up to 3 days in advance. How I did this was I used my Lei Needle and hemp twine, and I just simply cut the berries off the stems and threaded them on like beads. Next, I'll work with Hydrangea, and that definitely needs a water source for the length of an event. So I'm using these 4-inch water tubes from Syndicate Sales. I like them because they have a really tight rubber stopper, so even upside down, you won't lose water. So they're great for hanging installations. I've also chosen to work with Lisianthus, which is a really reliable, long-lasting flower as well. I love to use it in all sorts of large-scale installations. So for this, I used 20-gauge florist wire and my needle nose pliers, and I just made a little hook on the end of the wire, cut the blooms off the stems and threaded them onto the wire. The hook keeps them nicely in place. And then when I'm finished, I make another hook at the top of the wire. And then this is used to hang the strands into the installation. Third, I'll work with chrysanthemums, a very reliable, long-lasting flower. For event work, I like to use these without a water source. So I'll be tucking these in, kind of floating them forward of the hydrangea, and they'll just kind of stay in place because all these little laterals in the smilax vine will kind of grab onto them and hold them really securely. And as the final kind of finishing layer to this installation, I have some dried lunaria that I've pre-strung onto my hemp cord as well, and those will kind of dance and float over the whole composition. All right, so first I'll add the hydrangea, and I like to tube these the day of the event. I don't like to tube them beforehand because they might drink all of the water in the tube before they make it into the installation. So one thing to think about with tubing hydrangea, or tubing flowers in general for installation work, is you don't want to push the stem all the way to the tip of the water tube. You want to push it in about halfway. That way, when the flower is resting kind of horizontally or even upside down, there's a reservoir of water for the stem to uptake. And hydrangea are really great because they have these little notches that really keep the tube in place. So I know I can't insert it too far. So again, the great thing about this smilax is it has all these little laterals that really make this network of stems. When I add the hydrangea into the structure there, it'll just hold on to the hydrangea. You'll see how easy it is. Let's get started. All right, next the Lisianthus. I cut them off their stems and I wired them a day ahead. You can do 2 days ahead for these. They're really nice and resilient. What I do is I wire them, tuck them into an enclosed container like this, spray with water, and then tuck into my floral cooler. This is a natural conditioning method that I call a hydration chamber. It's just water and time. What happens during this process is the water vapor inside the enclosed container is forced into the little pores that are on the surface of the petals, leaves, and stems of natural materials. After time spent in the chamber, they emerge really plumped up and moisturized from the outside in, and they last about 2 times longer than they would without this process. So they're already wired, they have a little hook on the end, so I'm just going to take them up on the ladder and hook them into the installation. All right, and next I'll add the chrysanthemum, a wonderful flower to use for installations. I use them without a water source typically because they are so long-lasting, hardy, and resilient. Other flowers that work really well in this regard are carnations and marigolds. Last, these dried lunaria strands that I've threaded onto hemp thread. So here's the finished design. This floating arch would be perfect for a wedding ceremony or in the reception space. Maybe a sweetheart table could be underneath it, or for a photo shoot or any other kind of event. Next, I'm going to take all these components out and show you how it looks with one striking modern element. I'd like to show you another take on this floating arch, a more modern approach using one element, these beautiful black calla lilies. I love working with calla lilies. I love hanging them in installations because they are so long lasting. Without water, they can look perfect for 4 or 5 days. I also like to manipulate calla lilies and accentuate the curve of their stems. I think this will be really cool in this kind of swirly installation. It'll mimic the swirls of the smilax vine. So I'll show you a few ways to kind of coax calla lilies into a really pretty line. You can just massage using your thumb and forefinger to create an arc shape, and I can put these directly into the installation. If I want to hang them, I can make a little hook just by taking a toothpick and placing it through the stem. Then I can use the arms of the toothpick to hang into the arms of the smilax vine, just kind of like hanging Christmas ornaments. Another way to work with callas that I recently discovered and I really love is to make a little swirl just in the top of the stem. So I'll massage the top portion of the stem to make it pliable, and then I'll bring it back on itself like this. And then using a toothpick again, I join the two, just placing the toothpick through the stem into kind of the thick throat area of the calla. Not all the way through because I don't want the toothpick to show necessarily, but just until I can kind of feel it with the tip of my finger. And then on the back side, I can use it as a hook, or I can trim this off if I don't want it to show. And the third way I like to manipulate calla lilies is to join them. And to do that, I use a chenille stem or a pipe cleaner stem. You can soak these in water for a little bit of a hydration source for the flower, and you can also dip them in non-toxic glue like Elmer's glue to help join them together. But I've found that they are long-lasting and reliable even without the water or the glue. So this is how I do it. I take a stem, trim it off, insert the chenille stem into the calla lily until I feel like it's really holding. And then I take another flower and insert the other end into the throat of that flower until it feels again nice and secure. This way I can make chains with the calla lilies, and I can create these really kind of fantastical, swirling, long calla lily chains. Really fun. So now I'll just quickly go in and create a bunch of swirls and calla lily chains and design them into the smilax vine. So here's the finished floating arch, this time more minimalist and modern. I hope you like the ideas in this video. I hope it encourages you to see the possibilities in the flowers we have available to us. Take the ideas I offered here, fold them into your own style and what you love to do, and make them your own. Thank you to Mayesh for all the wonderful flowers you provide and for inviting me to share my take on sustainable flowers.